This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, of course, all eyes are on key central bank policy decisions coming out this week from the UK and the Eurozone as investors look to judge the pace of policy tightening going forward. But globally, we saw shares were in bullish territory today. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks rose 0.1% on the day. That's its third straight day of gains. Meanwhile, South Africa's JSE benefiting from a strong economy. The local bourse was on track for its third consecutive session of gains as investors refocused on earnings season, with sentiment lifting as some results came in more positive than expected. Now, also coming up on today's show, the AU summit kicks off with leaders calling for greater efforts to lift economies battered by COVID-19. The US government debt exceeds $30 trillion and nears a debt ceiling. And this startup is on a mission to bridge the gap in Nigeria's digital literacy sector. Well, let's start off with the AU meeting. Of course, it kicks off today in Addis Ababa, and the African Union is calling for a concerted effort in addressing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on African economies. Now, this call comes as the continent continues to battle with devastating financial losses. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arab-Moy with more.
The COVID-19 pandemic caught Africa, like the rest of the world, unprepared. From struggling healthcare systems to lack of vaccines, the continent is yet to contain the virus.
Today, our senses are awoken, and a race to improve our health systems and manufacture locally is afoot. Africa is surviving the health pandemic, but our economies are stretched.
At the opening of the AU ordinary session of the Executive Council in Addis Ababa, delegates called for a collective response to the pandemic.
So as Africa CDC and the Africa Union, we are supporting our member states to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on the economic and social sectors on this continent.
Despite positive strides to tackle COVID-19, the economic cost of managing the pandemic have remained high.
The lockdowns have meant that the economy of the country and the social system of the countries come to a total grind.
According to the AU, Africa's debt to GDP has risen from 40% in 2014 to at most 70% in 2022. Projected growth of 3.9% in 2022 is expected to do little to address the economic impacts of the pandemic. Africa has so far registered over 10.8 million positive cases with over 239,000 deaths. The African Union says that equity must be considered as a priority safety net to protect countries with few resources if the continent is to effectively contain the devastating impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Daniel Arab-Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, CGTN also caught up with the president of the Africa Business Council at the African Union Summit. Dr. Amani Asfo stressed the need to promote economic growth and also financial inclusion in Africa. Let's take a listen.
The most important strategy for Africa is to use its own resources and to industrialize its own resources, because this is actually what we are aiming for as Africa Business Council. Our main objective is to have a borderless, competitive, innovative Africa for trade, investment and industrialization. So what we are looking for initiative is really about to see what resources we have in Africa, how we build the capacity of our African private sector. And our strategy actually, which I call it the triad of empowerment of how Africa really promotes its economic growth, is a triad of empowerment, three pillars. three P's. The first is private sector strengthening, including small and medium enterprises, women and youth, how we build their capacity, how to train them, how to give them information, how to have them education. The second pillar is about policy advocacy. What policy do we need? What do we need from the heads of states for empowering our African private sector to achieve economic growth? It's about financial inclusion, how we have tailored programs for our private sector, small and medium enterprise, women, youth, how we have a special procurement policy. Certain percentage from the public procurement goes to African private sector. The third pillar is about product development, how we have a strong African product that will be competitive, will be standardized, and how we really use our partnerships. I mean, one of the main objectives of Africa Business Council is to make partnerships with external world, like we're talking about China, how we make joint ventures, how we make investment.
Now, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa says that the African Free Trade Agreement has the potential to boost intra-African trade by more than 52% by 2022. Well, Dr. Amani Asfour has also shared her views on the pace of that deal's implementation.
Till now, it's only less than 16%, our intra-Africa trade, while, for instance, in Europe, it's 60%, and in other parts of the world. How can we increase this intra-Africa trade? And this is actually was the main objective of the establishment of the Africa Business Council.
Of course, that's Dr. Mani at the African Union Summit. Let's move on now. Traders in Ghana are calling on the government to step up efforts to stabilize the country's currency. That's amid concerns over high inflation. Now, inflation is currently running at around 12.6%, and analysts are predicting that Ghana's cedi could yet fall further against the US dollar, adding more pressure on prices in the local economy. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Prince Oduola imports cars from the US and sells them in Accra. He says the cost of doing business has gone up due to the depreciation of the local currency, cedi, against the greenback.
The duty we paid is up at the current dollar rate every week. If the dollar goes up, the duty will be a bit increased.
In 2008, one cedi bought you $1. Now, you need 6 to buy that same dollar.
For us, we do margins because whatever rate it is, we pass on the value to our customers. But also, you need, for volumes of trade, you need a lot more cedis to be able to do the same volume of dollars. That means you need to augment more cash. You need to have a lot more cash reserve to be able to do the same $100,000 transaction.
Ghana's economy is steadily recovering from the pandemic, but the weakening currency is feeding through to inflation as the cost of goods and services shoots up. The central bank says the high demand for forex by importers has contributed to the depreciation of the value of the cedi against the US dollar, coupled with investors pulling out large sums of money from the country due to Ghana's debt sustainability concerns. The Ghanaian cedi depreciated against the US dollar by 4% at the end of last year. Analysts say the local currency is likely to depreciate further this year.
The cedi will depreciate in line with the fundamentals of the economy. High inflation as we have it, current account deficit, high budget deficit, all these things lead to some form of depreciation or demand for foreign currency and depreciation of the local currency. So as long as we continue to experience these macro fundamentals not around sustainable levels, we will see some form of depreciation in a flexible exchange rate regime.
The central bank says it will pump $450 million into the economy in the first quarter of this year to help stabilize the cedi. But some analysts believe it is unsustainable.
It can maybe halt the rate of inflation, right? But in the next 2-3 months, it may not be able to cover it. We now have about just 3 months of imports cover. And the amount of money that we're expecting to be pumped into the economy will probably just hold for a short period.
Prince Oduola fears the continuous depreciation of the cedi against the greenback will take a further toll on his business. He wants steps taken to stabilize the city to drive the economy to a more stable future. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, now let's take a look at some corporate headlines today. Kenya's government is set to spend an estimated $39.6 million to rehabilitate old railway lines. Now, the move is aimed at improving transit of goods to its neighboring countries. The plan is to revitalize the 217-kilometer Nakuru-Kisumu gauge railway, as well as the 77.8-kilometer Gilgil-Nyahururu branch, and the 69.05 Kisumu-Butere section. Meanwhile, the move by Ethiopian Airlines to fly passengers on the Boeing 737 MAX plane has now stirred up criticism. That's after a crash nearly 3 years ago forced regulators to ground the fleet globally. A lawyer for the victims of the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 accused the airline of having failed families on many fronts. The lawyer also adds that the status of the airline's own investigation into the crash remains unknown after nearly 3 years. And tech giant Amazon has announced 1,500 new apprenticeships across the UK. The opportunities range from engineering to health and safety and include more than 200 programs which are degree level. Now, Amazon has also previously offered a signing on bonus of over 1,300 to fill some roles. And Japan's Sony Group has posted a 32% increase in operating profit in the third quarter to $1.3 billion. That's partly to do with the success of its latest Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man No Way Home swung its way into breaking box office records, becoming the 6th highest grossing movie. Now, overall, quarterly operating profit at the Sony conglomerate was just over $4 billion, beating analysts' forecasts. And that's a look at corporate headlines today. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come on the show. We'll bring you more on an initiative that aims to improve female representation in Africa's energy industry, as well as a report on corruption linked to South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
A little tense here. Bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic saw investment flows from both local and international investors to Africa slow down quite significantly. However, Africa's tech space saw venture capital funding reach new heights in 2021, soaring over $4 billion. Now, Africa Arena is now predicting that VC funding could increase between $2.25 billion and $2.8 billion going forward. Well, local investors are now stepping up their game. Ventures Platform, which is an early-stage venture capital fund backing Africa's next generation of entrepreneurs, is one of the few sub-Saharan Africa-based VC firms who are writing checks for huge sums of money. The firm recently announced the first close of its new $40 million Pan-Africa early-stage fund to invest in market-creating innovations. Well, we spoke to the firm's CEO, Kola Aina, to find out where investors are looking this year.
Look, it's really interesting times. The pandemic, clearly, we view it as an accelerant of, sort of digital adoption. And so what you're seeing is a lot of companies in the fintech space, in the e-commerce space, have seen accelerated adoption of their platforms over the last 24 months. And this has also sort of flattened the investing borders. And so we're seeing an influx of capital from across the world. Last year, African startups raised an excess of $4 billion US dollars in venture capital, and the bulk of that was in fact in Nigeria. We're also seeing the unlocking of local venture capital. So for instance, in our fund, we're really proud that the first close of our fund was majority local capital, which is really critical to the growth of any startup ecosystem and any venture capital ecosystem. So I think it's more capital, more sources of capital, but also investors starting to look at sectors beyond fintech.
Well, you mentioned a ventures platform, and of course, you recently announced the first close of a new $40 million Pan-Africa early stage fund. You say you're going to invest in market-creating innovations. Where exactly then are you looking to invest these funds?
Yeah, so first off, our fund is a Pan-African fund. We call ourselves a discovery fund in that we really specialize in identifying high potential winners before they become obvious, right? And so we tend to invest at the early pre-seed stage with the capability to do follow-on investments through to seed and Series A. From a mandate standpoint, as a Pan-African fund, we're looking across the continent at companies in West Africa and Nigeria being a nexus. We're also quite keen on what's happening in North Africa and Egypt, as well as the eastern part of the continent with Kenya being a nexus. We also have an allocation for what we call the rest of Africa pocket. But really, the common strand in the companies we look at that they are building a market, creating innovation, that they are super early stage, because we can support them as they grow, but also that they have the potential to scale across the continent or across multiple regions of the continent.
Of course, our chat with Kola Aina, CEO of Ventures Platform there. Well, let's move on now. The Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet is a $10 billion initiative aiming to deliver renewable energy to 1 billion people by 2030. Well, the initiative will partner with a company called Shortlist. The two organizations want to improve female representation in Africa's energy industry. Now, the GEAPP and Shortlist's Women for Green Jobs initiative hopes to create about 750 green jobs for women across 6 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, joining us with more insight into this initiative is Suman Suresh Babu. She is the Managing Director of Demand Enterprise for the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet at the Rockefeller Foundation. Great to have you with us on the show today, Suman. And let's start off with that initiative. Give us a sense of how this initiative is planning to address the existential climate crisis that we're now facing, and of course, at the same time, improve Africa's access to power, especially given the discussions around Africa's minimal contribution to climate change and of course, its need to tap into fossil fuels in order to solve its power issues.
Thanks so much, Uche. Thank you so much for having me on the program. And that's a great question. We are really excited about the launch of the Alliance. First and foremost, the main goal is really to focus on energy access and better and more reliable energy systems. As you know, 600 million people on the continent do not have access to energy, and many hundreds of millions have access to poor quality energy, which really stifles economic growth and inclusive economic growth and holds back all of the potential for economic competitiveness. And I think what's most exciting about the Alliance is the ability to really take advantage of new technologies, renewable technologies, where the cost is rapidly decreasing to solve these challenges. And the focus of the Alliance, as you just mentioned, is on jobs, creating jobs through energy, on solving and addressing the climate crisis, and also supporting energy access. And I don't think that this is these three goals are in any kind of divergence. They actually do come together, given the fact that today, as you mentioned, 8% or 81 of the world's countries are only providing 8% of the CO2 emissions. But by 2050, those same 80 countries will produce more than 75% of the world's emissions. So the win-win here is, how do you build the energy system of the future in a way that is climate resilient and sustainable for the planet? And the falling costs means that this is not as much of a trade-off as it might have been 10 years ago. So we're very excited about the initiative and the ability to support partners across the continent to do this.
Right. Well, your collaboration, it actually aims to create 750 green jobs specifically for women across sub-Saharan Africa. What kind of jobs are you looking at creating, especially for women, when you talk about that clean energy value chain, which is traditionally male-dominated?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much opportunity for job creation and to really support women to get into these jobs. Everything from technicians to working at the plant level, whether it's in rural areas or urban centers, to front office staff, to leaders in the clean tech ecosystem. We are looking at, with our partner shortlist, really focusing on jobs that are helping women get into non-traditional jobs, having more women enter into the workforce, as well as really supporting women to grow their career and come into more visible spaces of leadership in the DRE and renewable energy sector.
All right. Well, we have run out of time, but many thanks for those great insights. We'll certainly follow the program. That is Suman Suresh Babu, Managing Director of the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet at the Rockefeller Foundation. Well, let's move on now. South Africa's Commission of Inquiry into State Capture has handed over the second part of its final report to President Cyril Ramaphosa's office. Now, the commission was tasked with investigating corruption during former President Jacob Zuma's presidency. It heard testimony from hundreds of witnesses detailing their accounts of events in terms of how government was allegedly manipulated by the Gupta family because of their strong ties with the former president. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njemela with the latest.
State capture refers to the way private individuals and companies illegally influenced state institutions to do their own bidding. This practice largely occurred during former President Jacob Zuma's presidential tenure. In the second batch of the report that was handed over to a representative from the president's office, the State Capture Commission reveals, amongst other things, that Transnet Rail Engineering was the primary site of state capture in financial terms. Transnet Rail Engineering is a state-owned manufacturer of railway components, including freight wagons, locomotives, and passenger coaches. The Commission also established that money laundering, fraud, kickbacks, and corruption were the order of the day at the company. The state-owned entity is one of many that serve as the engine of the country's economy. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the handover of the second part of the Commission report is a significant step forward for the work that government needs to do to rid South Africa of corruption. At least one analyst says the report will allow the country to deal with the corruption head-on now that it's been laid bare.
This second report that has been given to the president also allows the country at large to introspect in terms of how the politicians must look at themselves, in terms of how the citizens must behave, in terms of how the pieces that make up South Africa should work together in promoting and encouraging a corrupt-free South Africa.
Mambeu says while it's clear that there's widespread corruption here in South Africa, the country is also leading by example in terms of an effective judiciary.
Whatever happens in the context of South Africa has a big bearing on the continent. There's a big bearing in the region, especially in the region where you find that South Africa is used as a yardstick of democracy. It's used as a yardstick of social development. It's used as a yardstick of how state institutions can be used to disadvantage the majority, to loot from the state, and also how then the judiciary can play a role or an effective role in making sure that when people that are in power abuse institutions, or when people that are in power take advantage of institutions, how do they come in as a referee and as a final arbiter?
The third and final installment of the State Commission report will be handed over to the President at the end of February. Yulisan Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Uganda has signed the final investment decision to kickstart the country's oil and gas projects. Now, the agreement has been signed with Tanzania and joint venture partners China's CNOOC and French firm Total Energies. This marks the beginning of the development and construction phase and the subsequent commercial production of Uganda's oil and gas resources. Here's CGTN's Michael Baleke reporting.
Uganda is poised to become a crude oil exporter in 3 years. Oil companies China's CNOOC and France's Total Energies have committed to develop infrastructure to take the crude oil out of the ground, process it and transport it to the market.
FID is a step towards first oil, which is expected earlier 2025. This is a step towards unlocking more opportunities for investment and development in the Uganda and the whole region.
The final investment decision means civil works and the award of contracts for oil sites will commence in a few days. Engineering and procurement of machinery has also kicked off locally and around the world.
The impact of such massive investment include employment estimated at more than 10,000 jobs, foreign exchange earnings in the form of dividends, and service receipts from handling project cargo that is estimated at over 500,000 tons of imported equipment.
The development will also kickstart the construction of the longest heated pipeline in the world, spanning more than 1,400 kilometers from western Uganda to the Tanga port in Tanzania. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni says the pipeline will become the crude oil gateway for the region.
The same Albert Valley, but Congo side, there is petroleum there. There is petroleum in South Sudan. I think our Tanzanian brothers are also looking for petroleum in the Lake Eyasi area or something like that. I heard something like that. There's also likely to be petroleum in Burundi. So this East African crude pipeline may end up being a nucleus for the East African crude effort.
Uganda has so far discovered 6.5 billion barrels of crude oil reserves in the western part of the country. About 1.4 billion barrels will be recoverable, according to Uganda's Petroleum Authority. Uganda discovered oil in 2006, but the production date has been postponed several times over legal and regulatory issues, disagreements between the government and oil companies over taxes and revenue sharing, among others. However, as the development phase takes off, it still faces opposition from environment groups seeking to end the use of fossil fuels. Civil society organizations say the oil pipeline project threatens water resources, the livelihoods of millions of people in the Lake Victoria Basin, as well as wildlife. They have also petitioned international funders to pull resources out of the oil project, but the oil farms say they are taking steps to limit their footprint in sensitive areas.
We are also very conscious of the sensitivities of the areas where we are going to work, in particular from an environmental point of view. We are committed to leaving a positive environmental footprint, especially, of course, in the Murchison Falls Park, where together with our partners, we have the ambition to leave the environment in better condition than it was before the project began.
The oil companies have committed to invest more than $10 billion in projects in the next 3 years. The East African nation expects to reach daily output of 230,000 barrels per day. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, Egypt has begun building mining cities to extract gold, phosphate and copper. Authorities say they've also loosened regulations to attract investors to the mining sector. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the latest on this from Cairo.
Mining has been neglected for decades in Egypt in favor of petroleum and gas. But a transformation is underway with plans to launch mining cities in the eastern and western deserts of the country.
We're talking now about the Golden Triangle, which goes from Kena, Safaga, Qusir, over an area of 9,200 square kilometers. It's a very rich area when it comes to minerals and resources. The plan is to, over 30 years, to invest about $19 billion to create 350,000 jobs for Egyptians. And it's not only going to be mining, it's also to extract the minerals and have the added value on these minerals.
Egypt has huge reserves of about 22 minerals, but they're mostly untapped resources. For instance, there's only one main gold mine and one gold refinery recently established.
Currently, Egypt, it's about 15 tons per year. Sukari mines is the main gold mine in Egypt. In 2020, extracted 452,000 ounces of gold. That's equivalent of about $1 billion. The lifetime of a Sukari field, it will last for 20 years. We have probably 12 million ounces still remain to be extracted. The estimated reserve of gold in Egypt is about 300 tons, and attracting more companies to come and explore for the gold, definitely this number will change.
Bureaucracy and an outdated law from 1956 have kept businesses away. But Tamer Abu Bakr, a veteran of the energy and mining industry, believes the government is now on the right track.
احنا عدلنا القانون ده بالتعاون مع الجهات الحكومية.
A new law was drafted in 2014 but was full of loopholes, so didn't get approval except in 2020 after some good amendments. The main problem in mining, especially gold, is the type of contract offered to investors. Worldwide, contracts include license fees, royalty fees, and taxes. Our contracts, however, were oil and gas type of partnership deals which were not attractive for investors. Therefore, we changed contracts to be the same as the rest of the world.
As a result of a healthier business environment, 25 agreements were signed with 11 companies for gold extraction, in addition to new licenses for other minerals such as phosphate, copper, and zinc.
These minerals are vital for the economy, not as a raw material but an added value. When you do some processing on the mineral, its value will jump from $100 per cubic meter to $1,000 per cubic meter, and with more industrial processing, it will reach $4,000. Adding value and industrialization of these materials will raise revenue to support economic development that we badly need.
The target set by the government is for mining sector to hit 5% of GDP, up from the current 0.8% in 15 years' time. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. U.S. government debt exceeds $30 trillion and nears a debt ceiling. And Indonesia lifts a ban on coal exports.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being. And to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And here's a quick recap of other headlines this hour. At least 60 people have been killed at a displaced persons camp in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, head of a local humanitarian group and a witness say that the Codeco militia was responsible for the attack that left 63 people dead. Now, the attack took place at the Sabo camp in the Ituri province. According to the United Nations, the Codeco militia have killed hundreds of civilians in Ituri in recent years and forced thousands to flee their homes. And President Umaro Sissoco Embalo has broken his silence after surviving an attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau. Now, Embalo says many members of the security forces had been killed, repelling an attack that may have been linked to drug trafficking. The UN Secretary General has expressed deep concern about the growing number of coups in the West African region. And families living in Ethiopia's lowland regions are now struggling to survive a severe drought, which is drying up water wells, killing livestock and also crops, and of course pushing hundreds of thousands of children and their families to the brink of poverty. Now, the country now requires urgent humanitarian assistance in order to cushion the affected population. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. And now to international news. America's national debt has reached an all-time high of over $30 trillion earlier this week. That's triggered concerns about the country's future economic health. The debt levels are inching close to the federal government's debt ceiling, which was raised to $31.4 trillion last December by the U.S. Congress. Debt has risen due to massive government spending to fight COVID-19. Now, former U.S. President Donald Trump's large tax cuts also added to the debt stock. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office has warned that higher debt levels could trigger a fiscal crisis and lead to higher inflation. Meanwhile, the Indonesian government has lifted a ban on coal exports, ending uncertainties that sent the price of coal to this year's highest level. The country's Energy and Mineral Resources Ministry says that the ban was lifted on improving supply for local power plants. It also adds that coal exporters that have met the domestic obligation requirement and have agreed to pay related fines can now resume their shipments. Of course, Indonesia, one of the world's top exporters of thermal coal, paused its exports in January. And a beach in eastern Thailand was declared a disaster zone as oil leaking from an underwater pipeline in the Gulf of Thailand washed ashore and blackened the sand. Now, authorities are conducting cleanup operations to prevent the oil from contaminating other beaches. Despite this, there is concern that it will severely affect the tourism and fishing industry, which is already suffering from the impact of COVID-19. Here's our correspondent, Dusita Sako, reporting.
Black waves of crude oil. Along this 13-kilometer stretch of road that hugs the curves of the Gulf of Thailand, the salty breeze and white sand typically draws in tourists near and far. But scenes like this are hardly postcard perfect. This pristine beach in Rayong province, almost 200 kilometers southeast of Bangkok, has been declared a disaster zone. It was a disaster that was first detected here, 20 kilometers off the coast, at an undersea pipeline operated by Star Petroleum Refining. It was a race against time to do all they can to prevent the oil slick from making landfall. But it was too late. Authorities prepared for the worst.
We planned our efforts to contain the spill based on the worst-case scenario of 400,000 liters of leaked oil. There is a thin layer of oil spreading across the sea, but what we are concerned about is the tar balls.
But the damage is well underway. Under threat, a series of nature preserves near the shore, exotic coral reefs, and an abundance of marine life. These tar balls will not only swallow up small organisms, but the oil can suffocate the fragile marine ecosystem with its black cloak as it settles at the bottom of the sea.
When you're talking about oil slick, you have to think about the animal that cannot escape. The small creature, some of them are already dead. We're not looking for the impact will disappear in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We are talking about the number in years.
And as the response effort continues, the long-term ecological impact could be significant and be felt for many years to come. And hanging the balance is the livelihoods of residents, local businesses, small fisheries that are already reeling from the impact of COVID-19.
Not far away, on the same stretch of beach, a small fishing village. Every morning, these waters will be filled with boats, nets, and fish. But all that is visible now is the desperation on the faces of local fishermen.
More than 60 fishing boats in this village are stranded. This morning, I caught only 3 crabs. Usually, I would catch 40 to 60. Whatever we catch, we cannot sell. Being a fisherman is the only job we have. We don't have any other options.
As crews in protective suits fanned out along the beach, hoping to restore it to its former glory, it is what is less visible, the tiny organisms that keep the ecosystem thriving, the little guys who keep the local economy running, that will inevitably suffer the most. Lucita Saogao, CGTN, Rayong, Thailand.
Meanwhile, Disney's Lunar New Year event has returned to Disneyland, California this year. This follows a year-long closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic that, of course, lasted until April last year. Now, the world's largest theme park operator is now hosting a parade with dance troupes that tell the story of Mulan. Aside from live performances, visitors can also enjoy other activities, including Chinese art and food. Here's CGTN's Ediz Tiansen with more from Disneyland.
The Year of Tiger has arrived and celebrations have kicked off at Disney's California Adventure Park. A Lunar New Year procession fills the street with Chinese music, exquisite costumes, and traditional dances by Asian performing troupes.
I particularly like the Mulan and the Dragon Dance. I thought they were quite exotic. It's one of the biggest celebrations for the Chinese people and also people in Asia. So I think it's very nice and appropriate for Disney to have such a parade in a time like this. So very much appreciated.
As the highlight of the month at Disney, the show attracts thousands of people from all over the world.
Disneyland is celebrating the Chinese New Year in a parade performed daily out here in Southern California. Through traditional dances, they are telling the story of Mulan.
Other ways to celebrate include getting a calligraphy of your New Year wish in Chinese characters, or you can write them down yourself and hang it on the wall of New Year wishes.
Very simple. Good health, prosperity, and safety for my family and myself. Yeah.
That's very nice.
Yeah, very simple, nothing major.
Those simple wishes decorate the variety of Chinese food stalls in the park, bao buns for prosperity, or lucky 8 lantern for good luck.
Chinese culture is very colorful and usually bright and exciting, so they've invented fireworks. So our New Year's is kind of symbiotic in my mind. It's the same thing as a New Year to me. It's a new beginning. It's new luck, a new start.
A new start for thousands of people who are celebrating Chinese New Year with music, dance, arts, and food. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Disneyland in Anaheim, California.
Well, on that note, here's a quick look at commodity markets today. Oil prices headed towards last week's 7-year highs as a continued fall in U.S. crude stocks confirmed strong demand and tight supplies, though investors remained cautious before an OPEC Plus meeting expected today. Meanwhile, gold prices steady today, hovering close to the $1,800 psychological level as a weaker dollar and lower U.S. bond yields countered risk appetite, which was spurred by less hawkish comments from U.S. Federal Reserve officials. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come on the show. This startup is on a mission to bridge the gap in Nigeria's digital literacy sector.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, Nigeria recorded major growth in the digital space in recent years, but the growth has not been even across the country. The north of Nigeria is still lagging behind, especially in digital literacy. Now, one IT startup in that part of the country has taken up the challenge to change that narrative. And here's CGTN's Deji Badamosi with this story.
Meet the man who's taking up the rather daunting task of bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria. In a part of the country where digital literacy is low and in some cases considered a luxury, Raphael Issa is not only trying to help young people from the north acquire digital literacy skills, he's also empowering them to secure their future through technology. And he's succeeding. When he launched GreySoft back in 2015, a session like this was hardly packed. But today, more young people in his base in Kaduna, northwest Nigeria, are signing up to his digital literacy initiative.
We're trying to achieve proper structure for MSMEs, trying to see that startups are properly structured, especially those of them that are tech inclined. We're trying to see that we are able to solve our own problems right here in the north using technology. The good thing is that as of now, we have a governor who is tech inclined. He's tech savvy, someone who appreciates technology, and his government has done quite a lot of things that shows that, yes, indeed, technology is the way forward.
Issa has since gone on to create different arms of GreySoft to address different challenges. Today, there's Grey Tech, which builds applications to solve various problems. Grey Create focuses on filmmaking and creating local content. And then there's also Grey Hub, which serves as an incubator and co-working space for startups and provides mentorship as well.
When startups are starting, their greatest challenge, one of their greatest challenge, of course, will be to rent a facility. They don't even have money. They're just starting, right? And they can't recruit the proper team that they need at that level. They can't afford to pay salaries. When you come to they can't buy 24-hour electricity, neither can they buy 24-hour internet service. So when you come to this place for a very small token, right, you have access to Grey Hub. So you can have access to 24-hour electricity, 24-hour light. You can have meetings with your clients in this place. You can have access to our business incubation and acceleration programs. You can have access to our business mentors. You have access to informal teams. And that means that the next person sitting by your side is just able to answer the next question that you're looking for someone to do for you.
Step by step, ISA is making great strides in providing digital literacy through GreySoft. The number of young people in the north enrolling in GreySoft is growing, and so is the number of startups springing up in that part of Nigeria.
So as more people come into tech in the north, you know that it brings about accountability, it brings about effectiveness, it brings about transparency, and it brings about resourcefulness. So by 2025, one of the things that will really satisfy us is to see that we have empowered well over 100,000 people. And we are trying to see that more people will come to understand that with the requisite knowledge of digital literacy, with the right level of digital literacy, they can, as a matter of fact, have a better life.
Bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria certainly requires a painstaking and consistent effort, knowing that the south is not slowing down in its expansion of digital literacy. But Issa has started a marathon race with GreySoft, and he says he will not slow down in his quest to drive digital literacy in a region that badly needs it. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Kaduna, Nigeria.
Well, before we leave it today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand easing 0.2%, and that's as local risks resurfaced in the country. Of course, South African utility firm Eskom announced scheduled power cuts from Wednesday until Monday. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling was trading unchanged today against the dollar, but was expected to weaken due to increased importer demand amid subdued inflows. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. For me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.